Well, you guys sure are suckers for punishment. Hello, it's chapter 11. We've reached it, and by Jiminy, I very nearly didn't reach it today because it was one of those very tempting days, you know, when the duvet calls, a duvet day. I did not want to get up. I said to my wife, I don't think I feel very well today. And then, you know what? I got up. I got doing the house chores. I put on a podcast. Later on, we went out shopping. And we walked the whole way there and back. Oh, but I really didn't feel like pouring it on, boys and girls. I did not. And then later on, I was working with this on the voiceover front, a British director. And normally people just take my work and are really happy with it. But sometimes you actually have to do your job. And that involves multiple takes, and he's a real... Oh, I don't know about that. Could you do it slower but make it sound faster? No, not quite there yet. Can we try the Stravinsky method? There was a click at the end. Right. I did not read through this like I like to do, first of all. So if we meet some fluffs or bumps along the road, you will forgive me, won't you? Chapter 11, The War of Ideas. There is nothing new in materialism. It is as old as the story of the apple in the Garden of Eden. But the new factor about materialism in our modern world is this. For the first time in history, it's gonna start raining men. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. For the first time in history, materialism is consciously and cleverly organized, nationally and internationally, by men who are committed to gain power on the widest possible scale. Materialism today is a worldwide, militant and organized force. Yet many of us, full of idealism and vague goodwill as we may be, stay blind to it. All my life I had loathed narrow-mindedness. By the phrase narrow-minded, I meant those who disapproved of what I did. As a Fleet Street man, I fancied myself broad-minded, by which I meant that I would not interfere with others if they let me live as I liked. But suddenly I saw exactly how broad my own mind was. Indeed, I could draw a diagram of my mind on paper. It was as broad as the letter I, neither more nor less. For years I had thought of everything and everybody in terms of how they affected myself. My glasses are steaming up. Must be the excitement. No more messing from now on, promise. A bit too giddy. Bit too giddy. Calm down, Marco. This was natural enough for a man whose master passion, like the master passion of millions, was to get on in the world, up and down that single monotonous track. My mind had wandered ceaselessly to and fro until a groove had been worn into, which my thinking had sunk, and I was incapable of looking in any direction but the one of self-interest which I had chosen. I was blinded by my own materialism. I never saw the organized militant materialism which, on the march, causes war and revolution. Why? I was part of it. Materialism, the spirit of gimme in the hearts of men, is the mother of wars. It is also the mother of isms. Karl Marx, for example, was a man of ambition. He believed that the gimme in man, his desire to grab as much as possible from himself, from his world while he was in it, was man's chief motive of life. Marx thought that to be the natural and right motive. He urged the masses to band together and seize by force the things they wanted. So he built up a leadership of ambitious and embittered men and a worldwide following of those who were too soft to say no to material desire. He integrated the spirit of gimme in the heart of man into a political creed and worldwide revolutionary movement. Marxism is materialism militant, said Lenin. So is Hitlerism. So is fascism. And every ism. I, and millions like me in Britain, disapproved of the isms in the interwar years. Yet we were ourselves a part of that materialism, that spirit of gimme, which made the march of the isms possible and inevitable. The militant materialists deluded millions in Britain, just as they enlisted millions on the continent. There are more ways of organizing materialism than by the continental techniques of swastika and sickle. In Britain, materialism was organized by those who hoped to gain power, cash or pleasure by it. Apart from the recognized apostles of the isms in these islands, it was organized, for instance, by certain sections of Fleet Street who built circulation on must. Oh no, I spelled it wrong. Yeah. What's this? It's an ambit. What's it? What do they call it? Dyslexia. Dyslexia rules, KO. Yeah, I made must out of smut, it says here. By certain sections of Fleet Street who built circulation on smut and sensation, presenting news and comment in a way which would suit advertising revenue. Equally, it was organised by certain business circles and some leaders of labour who exploited the market or their associations for personal power, and by an influential group of intellectuals who degraded art into self-expression and conduct to the level of the farmyard in order to make money for themselves and fortify themselves in their own illicit pleasures. This materialist front in Britain was as real as the materialist front against which we declared war. Today, as I write, we are at war, and we shall be at war long after Germany and Japan are beaten. For we are fighting two wars. Both are fought on a world front. One is the war of arms. It involves tanks, guns, planes, armies, and alliances. The other is the war of ideas. It involves faiths, standards of conduct, and philosophies of life. The war of ideas began before the war of arms, and it will continue long after the war of arms is ended. It is possible to be on the same side in the war of arms, but with different objectives in the war of ideas. Russia, for example, is at the time of writing an ally in the war of arms. Her military power has turned the tide of battle. But is Russia's idea our idea? We may fight and win the war of arms together, while still reserving the right, as friends, to differ upon what is the best big idea in matters of faith and government. We fight a total war. The aim of total warfare must be total victory. For that we need to win the war of ideas as well as the war of arms. A mere disapproval of the isms will never conquer them, for the isms are new and powerful faiths that the organized and militant established churches of materialism, for which millions risk everything. A powerful faith, even if it is a faith in a false god, will always brush aside and smash down men and nations which have no fighting faith at all. Any religion is stronger than no religion. When totalitarian materialism or the organized spirit of gimme becomes a militant way of life, then it bids to occupy the spiritual territory of other nations, to alter their way of life, as definitely as do the armed forces of aggression. So victory in the war of arms, though essential, is not adequate by itself to produce total victory, for you cannot win the war of ideas by armed force. You cannot shoot an idea dead. Men have often tried to do so, and often failed. A victory of our arms will not necessarily conquer their faith any more than a victory of their arms conquered the faith of the free in many an occupied territory. It is conceivable that we might win the war of arms and lose the war of ideas. In that case, we should find established on a world front, after victory, the way of life we went to war to beat. As I began to think in these terms, I saw clearly the nature of the struggle in which we are engaged. I saw that the big question of contemporary history is, what idea will dominate the world when the war is over? A victory of USA, Russia, China, and Britain over Germany and Japan cannot answer that question, for these victor nations do not all share the same ideas. Nor do all the citizens in any one victor nation share the same ideas. For while the war of arms is between nations, the war of ideas runs through nations. In the war of ideas, we fight against a spirit of materialism, a spirit of gimme, a spirit which breeds wars and isms. A wrong spirit in the heart of man. The battle lines in the war of ideas runs through every factory, farm, home, and life in every land. Whenever I am on the get, out for myself at the expense of the other fellow, the other class, the other race, I become a fifth columnist in the war of ideas, for I am part of the very materialism which creates and makes formidable the isms. Men become infected with the conviction that to get as much as possible matters more than anything else in the world. They come to represent a get front, a fifth column centre, and wield an intangible, invisible force which powerfully impacts the spirit of their nations and their neighbours. It was this get front, the spirit of materialism in me and millions like me, which made possible the world situation between the wars. In Britain, we never dealt with it, because we never fully recognized the idea, the war of ideas. We saw plenty of things in the isms which we did not like. We hated the symptoms of the disease, but we never saw that the elements of the disease itself were in our own national bloodstream. As a democracy, we are particularly equipped to turn the tide in the war of ideas. All our greatness and the enduring principles of our democratic heritage have sprung from the Christian faith of generations of our ancestors. That has been Christianity's gift to the world, the conceptions of honesty, moral principle, God control, fair play, freedom, lived for and died for by reformers, martyrs, soldiers, statesmen for 2,000 years. Democracy's destiny must be to turn back the oncoming ideas of militant materialism in the war of ideas, as effectively as alone Britain turned the tide of armed aggression in the Battle of the Skies after Dunkirk. Chapter 12 tomorrow, which is called Man of the Future. My apologies that my read was a bit clunky today due to the circumstances I outlined originally before I began kind of clunking it. You know, I think you need to do a bit of a recce on those chapters before I just start reading them to camera. But hey, I'm only human, and I told you exactly the circumcisions that caused me to screw things up today. Like and subscribe, or make your comments on the comments, or buy me a coffee in the description through my PayPal. And maybe I don't deserve coffee today, but my ding-a-ling will be on hand to acknowledge anyone who's brave enough to step forward and say they listen to me and my ideas have legs.